Okay, good to go. It said on my screen, so I will just assume that we are all live in this session here now. I see 35 people in the session and counting, so I'll just get this kicked off here while we have more participants joining us. First of all, hello everyone. I'm saying hello from Denver, Colorado. My name is Daniel Masada. I am the founder of Volante, the workforce agility platform, where our goal is to turn workplace and career change journeys into more proactive, positive, and empowering experiences. I'm usually based out of New York, out there on Long Island. This is a German accent, though, not the Long Island accent just yet. Been over here for 10 years. I'm very excited to host this panel with three star panelists here. This is the session talking about lessons learned in 2021 that will define the future of work. We are going to talk about the impact of what work really looked like in 2021 on employee experience, on company culture, on retention, on ways of working inside of companies. We're also going to talk about how technology and digital tools influence people's workplaces and ultimately their careers. And we're going to talk about this much quoted topic of upskilling and reskilling as well, because as we see more change in workplaces and careers, obviously that drives demand and interest in upskilling and reskilling services and technologies and platforms. So as I mentioned already, I have three superstar panelists here with me today. One of them, Mary Finley, was part of this already last year. So great to have you back, Mary, and then Eleanor and Ranjit. Welcome on this stage as well. I'll switch things up a little bit compared to the other sessions here today when it comes to introductions. So what I'll do is I'll very briefly introduce all three of you, but then I'll ask every single one of you to, first of all, amend the introductions that I will have shared here. And then if you can, add one fun fact, or just a fact, right? If it's not funny, that's fine, but a fun fact ideally about yourselves or your roles or your companies. And I'll kick it off with you, Eleanor. I think Eleanor Vezovic is the VP for Strategic Solutions at Paradox. Paradox is a company that recently raised $200 million in Series C funding, which launched you all far into the unicorn universe. I know, Eleanor, so that cannot be a fun fact. I know that you were employee number 36 at Paradox, and now the team grew to more than 400. We had the pleasure of working together at our previous company, and it is great to have you on here. I'll continue with Ranjit and then Mary, and then again, I'll ask you to just chime in here and add those fun facts here. Ranjit, you and I, we met for the first time back in 2006. Yeah, I know I'm dating ourselves here. We both went on to do many different things inside of Adecco Group at the time. When I think of Ranjit, I think about someone who has a perspective on human capital management services and technology like few others, really, right? Most recently, Ranjit led LHH, Leahy Harrison, the global human capital services, career transition, career development company at a global level. And Ranjit is also one of the few people in my network who know what the blockchain really is. I don't. And then last, but of course not least, Mary Finley, Chief People and Culture Officer at Advanced Group, a clinical research outsourcing and staffing company based out of Chicago, but with an increasingly global presence all around the world. And Mary is a truly trailblazing chief people officer, early stage customer for us here at Volante, and always a pleasure to have in a setting like this here. So that was my short introductions of all of you, but now I'll open it up to you all, starting with Eleanor, to add any items that I might have forgotten or any fun facts that you want to share with the group here.
I think a little fun fact, right? So since we get to sit on the topic of conversations and technology and kind of blending the two together, with Olivia, right? She's our virtual assistant for recruiters and part of Paradox. But fun fact from last year, she answered over 30 million questions, right? 24/7, 365. And so she was probably one of the busiest assistants I've come across, globally in about 100 different languages. So little fun fact that kind of blends conversation, human, and a little technical.
That sure sounds busy. Thanks, Eleanor, for sharing that with the group here. Ranjit, on to you.
Well, I guess my fun fact would be much more in the moment, but a bit of a reflection of the future of work. This is the fourth different platform I've been on just today. Google Meet, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and I think it's just a good reflection of technology and how the different platforms that we are using, kind of juggling them. And so I'm just happy that I was able to get onto this platform today, let alone talk about the blockchain, Daniel.
Yeah, right. But yeah, the new normal, right? 4, 5, 6 different platforms to interact with during any given day. The new normal here in the post, or I guess still in pandemic world. Yeah, great to have you on as well, Ranjit. And over to you, Mary.
Yeah, I love that. I'll pick up on Eleanor's. You said Olivia had answered so many questions. I have a 3-year-old named Nora who I think asked me that many questions in the last couple of weeks. She officially entered the why phase. So recently did some problem solving exercises and utilized the 5 whys. And then I came home and my daughter asked me 5 whys for all of the things that she wanted to learn and know. So that's my fun fact. I'll rely on her. I became a mom 3 years ago, and that totally changed my experience with work and what it means in my personal life. And I guess I'll touch on some of that in 2021 too, how our employees have juggled family and work.
That's great. Thanks, Mary. I'm sure you were thanking that teacher for, asking your daughter to ask even more questions when she comes home, right? So yes, my kids are 13 and 15 now. They ask me different kinds of questions now, but I still remember those days. Yeah, very good. Well, again, thanks for having all of you on here. And of course, thanks to everyone in the audience here for joining this session. I said that we were going to talk about the impact of these new ways of working on culture, on employee experience, on talent retention. We're also going to talk about the impact of digital on workplaces and careers, right? Eleanor, great example there right away, right? Digital assistant that answers, a lot of the questions that recruiters get bombarded with every single day, right? Fantastic example. And then, Ranjit, would love to pick your brain later on here on some of these topics of upskilling and reskilling and how, we can really make them tangible and actionable inside of companies, right? But what I would like to start with is the topic of culture and employee experience in this current world of work that is certainly different from what it looked like 2 years ago, right? And so, Mary, maybe to you, Advanced Group is a company where company culture and employee experience really is a core value and a key part of the value system inside of the organization. And I know, of course, there will be people listening here who say, well, doesn't everybody say that? Doesn't every company say that? And I think everybody does, but I have had the privilege of working with you and your peers on the C-suite at Advanced Group for, I think, over 2 years now. And I know that it's true. And I'll even, weave in a little anecdote here from our work together, Mary, that just confirms that point. Because, Volante is an employee focused platform. And, Mary, in our work together, you have challenged us all along. And the entire team here at Volante is so thankful for this, but it really, speaks to this point here that I'm making. You've challenged us all along to say, okay, we have a lot of tools and technologies in the organization already, right? On the previous panel, one of the speakers referred to it as being over-tooled, right? I love that term. And you challenged us to say, okay, how can we make sure that this is not just an additional platform, an additional tool that sits on the side and ultimately people won't pay as much attention to, and instead it's a tool, a technology that bundles activities, that bundles content, that really helps people do their job in a better and faster way. So I've experienced myself firsthand what it means for you to say, employee experience and company culture is important, and our employees really come first, right? So, with that in mind, 2021, just outside of course, the Volante experience here, my own experience, but 2021 has tested companies when it comes to this element of maintaining and further nurturing employee experience and culture and company culture. Sometimes as an employee, you felt disconnected from what's happening in the organization. Sometimes you feel over-connected, like too connected, right? Here's another Zoom call. I see my colleagues again, although it's 7 p.m. at night. So really just curious to hear from you as a practitioner and a trailblazer in the people and culture space, Mary. How did you deal with some of those challenges in 2021? And maybe to begin with, what were your biggest challenges as a chief people officer during these challenging times here?
Yeah, it's a big question. Thank you, Daniel. And you're very kind when it comes to my profile. I appreciate that. So how did we deal with it? I think the most honest and human answer is we dealt with it really one day at a time. And I think that actually says a lot about how we tried to bring our culture to life. It was really showing our own, as an organization, leader and organization, showing our own challenges, being vulnerable and acknowledging to our teams that really we had to understand what was coming at us that day, how to best navigate it, and then make the best decisions that we could in that moment. And so I look back on 2021 with so many lessons learned, so many experiences gained, and a lot that I would have done differently had I had some of the knowledge that I have now. But really viewing that through the lens of the growth mindset and being agile and nimble to be able to respond and set that example as a company that we don't expect people to have all the answers. And I think maybe we were all brought down a couple notches over the last few years. And that's okay, right? That's a good thing. So bringing some more humanness to what we do. For our challenges, when I think back about 2021 in particular, because 2020 was like survival, just get through the day, hopefully we make it through the end of the year. Then 2021 really became that time to say, okay, how do we operate differently? Our company, like many others, started to experience rapid growth. So not only are we dealing with all of these challenges, but we're actually growing faster than we had been. So it's not even just getting back to status quo, but being able to manage through all of the growth challenges too. So for us, from a people perspective, I'd say that really came down to onboarding, effective onboarding into the business. And I think more so around helping our new employees, both leaders and staff, understand why and how to work in our company versus just what they needed to do. And I would say that tech enabled our ability to do that using different tools, but it also challenged us to be able to really translate the human part of our jobs to people who don't know us, who haven't felt what it's like to work at our company. And so onboarding is a challenge that we're still working on. I think secondly, creating that connection beyond just new staff, but that creating the connection of being a part of this organization, being attached to something bigger, being supported by your colleagues and the company really needed to bridge that gap as well. And then lastly, I mentioned we had kind of a rocket year after the beginning of the pandemic. So balancing growth with realistic expectations. And that is not always symbiotic, right? And people have different definitions of realistic expectations. So really helping our leadership team and our organization navigate how to really lean into the growth that we were experiencing, but do it in a way that preserved, kind of employee well-being and our culture, and that's an ongoing challenge for us too. So I think from a technology perspective, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did without technology. I mean, just the platforms that we connect on, hosting hundreds of our employees globally on culture conversations and allowing them to be on video and share and have that dialogue across our teams. It made a huge impact, but technology has not always been able to bridge that physical distance between each of us. And so for us, I think technology, really leaning in on the personalized experience with technology, kind of that more human versus it being a layering on, I think is kind of where we look to go from here.
Yeah, great insights, Mary. Thank you. And Eleanor, this topic of technology and the crossroads of technology and human, right, and employees is what I'd like to use as a segue, to your scope of work and what you see in the market. But just to react to one thing here, Mary, that stands out to me in what you just shared with us, walking this fine line between high growth in markets, on top of that, seeing growth even beyond your current existing markets and going international, right, with the international expansion that you went through. So really, you're in need of a high performing organization. Everybody has to be doing their A game here. And at the same time, you just said also, it was important to be even more human with your employees than ever before, right? Maybe giving a little slack here and there, maybe understanding that everybody's still trying to figure out, whether they have a 3-year-old or a 15-year-old. There's just so much that came together. And I think, if I was in the audience here, I would think, wow, making that a topic at the chief people officer, C-suite level inside of the company is really how you address these moments and how you help employees navigate these difficult moments, right? So that's great to hear. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And then again, Eleanor, when I hear Mary talk about the crossroads of technology and human, right? You just said it. One of the key products or features, I don't know how you would call it, a paradox, is a virtual assistant that takes workload off of the shoulders, off of a recruiter and recruiting teams inside of organizations. That's a great example of, a technology that for many is probably looked at as a great help, but maybe by others also as a potential threat, because maybe Olivia is better at answering certain questions than I am. So how do you help organizations deal with some of those questions that probably, I would think, come up, or maybe they don't, you tell me, but that crossroads of technology and human is right where you sit with Paradox. So, what was 2021 like for you all, and what were the biggest challenges for you?
Wow. Yes. I mean, all of the above, right? When it comes to the questions and the concerns and whether or not they're outwardly stated or also assumed and kind of sneaking in the back of recruiters' minds, coordinators' minds, or even the talent acquisition teams, right? It's just like, ooh, you can schedule interviews, you can answer questions, you're sending out reminders. Well, those are all the things I do every day. What does that mean to my job? And I think, if I break it down to the reflections of last year, a lot of it really did come down to human. When we're doing solutions and we're working through a client, problem set, those problems are surfaced by, it's not a buyer conversation. It's, what are the candidates experiencing? What are the talent acquisition teams experiencing? What are the problems, the hurdles, the things that are stopping them from taking action or hiring someone or onboarding someone even, right? And so all of that, you break down the problem, you work through that, and through those conversations, you see, what are we missing? Is it a conversation? Is it a reminder? Is it something that we can automate, that a technology would be better suited to do because it's happening at 11 p.m. at night? It's happening, it's needed over the weekend. And so when we come down to the problem set, when we look at the options for, is it a people solve? Is it a process solve? Or is it a technology solve? Or is it a combination of all three, right? How do we introduce that with a balance of, it's no longer disruptive technology, right? It's needed technology, it's assisted technology. Yeah. And we balance it with the appetite of change. Everyone's going through it. Everyone's accepting it. But we also balance it with an introduction of how much is too much, right? So it might be that we coordinate or build a solution that is happening, that is helpful for this rapid growth. So we need to hire 1,000 people, and we need to find ways to do this and hire a class and interview, schedule, start, all within 5 days, 5 hours, right? Yeah. Or it could be a problem that we're solutioning for, where it's a decline. We're having to communicate a change in the schedule. We're no longer opening the office in Dublin, Ohio, and we're having to redirect those resources or mass message, and we're having to do a different type of solution where it's the recruiting team has shrunk by 50%. So how do we multiply them and give them an assistant to help with time, with energy, with activities, and multiply that team, right? And so being able to be that partner, develop that solution, but with the human problem set of the ebb and flow, and be flexible enough to be that solution either way, has been where we had to adapt, right? We learned that not every problem is one directional, that it could be a problem that we face in the first 3 months. That problem may no longer be a priority in the next 6 months. And how do we ensure that we adapt, we change, and we support no matter what, right? And be available. And sometimes it's not even a technology solution. Sometimes it's literally a listening solution. How do we support you? How do we empathize with you? And how do we connect with you so that you can service and really be that problem solver for your teams and extension of clients, right?
That sounds like a very thoughtful approach to digitization and digital transformation with your customers, right, and with the teams there. And it's really interesting and really good to hear this, because as I'm listening to you and hearing you describe some of the almost use cases, right, at a high level, where Paradox and Olivia would come in, I feel like I'm being thrown back into probably 1999 or 2000, when I started my career in this industry as a recruiter's helper in a professional staffing office over in Germany. And I did what Olivia does today, probably, or what Olivia should be doing, right? So if I put myself into those shoes again, and you are part of a team, you're working for the more senior level recruiters or the sales team, and you're doing all these little things, and then technology comes into the picture, knowing that the people who introduce that technology have a thoughtful approach like the one you were describing, to really understand the full picture. What's the people side of this? What's the technology side of it? What's the process side of it? Is great to hear. I'm sure we're going to get back to that again in a little bit here, Eleanor. But maybe to pull Ranjit in here as well, right? Ranjit, I said earlier, you've seen so many aspects and dimensions of the human capital management industry and services and technology across the globe, really. But one of the topics that I know is near and dear to your heart as well, and to what you've done professionally, is this upskilling and reskilling space, right? And then again, listening to Eleanor here talking about how probably both broad and deep some of the changes is that technology in the space can now drive, just makes me think that especially our industry right here, everyone on this call in the audience is in human capital management, staffing, HR services, very people intensive industries where it just sounds like and it feels like people will have to acquire new skills and really be on top of their own career journey, right? What do you think were the biggest challenges, and what have you seen as the biggest challenges for companies in 2021, and where do you think we're going from here?
Yeah, and again, big question, as the others were before. What I would say, to put it in one word, is speed. Right, that has been the biggest challenge, because I do not believe that any of the trends that we're seeing, and I'll get to the kind of underlying trends in a second, but none of these trends, were unforeseeable or not happening already pre-COVID. But I think, the last couple of years, it's just been a slingshot into the future. Everything has gotten so accelerated, and that has really been the challenge, right? Dealing with the speed of at which stuff is happening. So, when you think of the trends which are really posing the big challenges, and I think, for companies big and small, and in the recruitment industry and outside of the recruitment industry for that matter, it's definitely automation, digitalization, as Eleanor and Mary were already mentioning, and really ensuring that you have in-house the skills for specific topics like data science, digital marketing, certain coding skills, and the challenge that you just can't find those skills out there in the market, right? Or they come at a very, very high price. Yeah. So I think that is the first big challenge that you're dealing with. I think at the same time, there's a great article this week in The Economist around that, specifically about the US, but this goes for pretty much all of North America and Western Europe. The workforce has shrunk. So we've been talking about how the baby boomers are going to retire for probably a decade, but it actually happened in the last 2 years, right? In the last year. And that means that our workforce has permanently shrunk, and that is going to provide us with a huge challenge, is creating a huge challenge for us right now. And so I think that's the second thing which I saw really in a marked way, in the last couple of years. Some folks will tell you, for example, in the engineering industry, that they've been dealing with this for some time already. But I think now it is really broadly a challenge. And then I think the third one is really at a personal, individual level. A lot of people have reflected, because of COVID, what are their priorities? What do they really want to get out of work, right? What is the purpose of the organization, and what does my daily work look like? What is the culture of leadership, and does that align with my personal priorities and personal values? And I think a lot of people have taken the conclusion that it doesn't, and that's a huge challenge, right? How do you get that right without even being judgmental that there is a culture which is right or wrong? It can be very different by industry, by company, but having a large part of your workforce take that reflection, take that step back, and then actually take action, because there's always a difference between having an intention to, for example, leave a job and then actually putting that into action, but that's happening right now. I think that's also a huge challenge for any employer and all the organizations that I'm speaking to. And then the last thing which I would mention, right, is because we've spent so much time at home, right? And I have probably all had, even those who might not have spent that much time in Netflix previously, have had a lot of time to do so. We've just been so exposed to the consumerization of technology that many people have have come back to the workplace and said, it cannot be that we are dealing with such, old school technology on a day-to-day basis. A lot of the startups that I work with now in my job day to day, right, they're working really on cutting edge technology, and the nature of the technology is really that it's consumerized, right? It's very, very easy to use. The user experience is amazing. It's very intuitive. It guides you through an experience, and I think that is a huge change, which we're going to see in the corporate world and the B2B experience.
Yeah. Yep. Great thoughts, Ranjit. Yeah. On the last point, you're right. We're all so used to being able to manage our whole lives, shopping and traveling and you name it, on our phones and in ways that are just so convenient. The expectation is that the same goes for the technology that we interact with in the workplace, right? Yeah. Great thoughts there, Ranjit. And then on your second last point, there was a question here in the chat that I'd like to address, and I think you were kind of going there already, Ranjit, right? This whole idea of the great realization, the great reflection, and then unfortunately also the great resignation. The question here in the chat here was, what are people really looking for most? Why is it that they're leaving? Is it purpose? Is it more money? Is it different ways of working? Is it what is it really? Any thoughts here? Anyone or all three of you, I guess? What have you seen in 2021 and where do you think this is going?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. My answer is not one of those things. So I'm not going to select one. I mean, I think what I think people are looking for, that I've experienced is really three things, and you kind of have to have all three or else they're going to look somewhere else. And so the first, I do think, is competitive and fair pay. So I do think salary still is a huge consideration for people, especially with inflation and everything, all the other pressures that are in the market. So I think you have to have competitive pay. If you don't have that, you're not going to be able to get the talent regardless of your culture. I do think you have to have visible opportunities for growth, and it needs to align with where they are in their career. You might retain them for 18 months to 2 years, but if you don't have that opportunity for growth, you're not going to have them much longer than that. And then I do think that culture and purpose alignment, to earlier comments, is critical. I really think you have to have all three. And when you do, then you have an employee who's really bought in to your organization, feels really supported and aligned, and that's where you'll see more longer term retention.
And there's no ranking for you in these items,
I think the pay to me is like Maslow's hierarchy. Like, you have to get the pay right. But if you don't have the other two, then you're not gonna get that longer term employee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, the yes and to that, right, is 2021 marked the year of the hourly worker, right? And so when it comes to that, the pay, the speed that Ranjit was speaking on, right, that was critical. And then I would add the kind of encompasses the culture is the transparency. And that all can begin at the point of application. So I've applied. Where am I in the process? Am I being dispositioned? If so, help me understand why, right? So this world of feedback, of immediate, and expected communication is real. Whether it's being able to like something on Netflix, right? As you mentioned, Ranjit, right? Being able to also dislike something. It's the same when it comes to the consumerization of expectation, right? Is that if I'm dispositioned or if I'm not going to, if there's no action, no communication to me, whether it's a yes or whether it's a no, you've lost me, right? You've lost me. And so how do we combat that? And I think that's a critical piece. And also if I'm to add one controversial piece of this too, is for those coming into the workforce, whether you've just recently graduated, you're an intern, you're an early, you're maybe 1 to 3 years within the workforce. There is an expectation to add one more item to that list, that Kyle brought up, which is the technology. What technology am I going to use in this job? How advanced is it, right? How advanced are you as a company? Can I access your website from my phone? Can I connect with anybody? And if so, how, right? What does that look like? And I think that is going to be a determination between, do I join Meta, right? Or do I join, LinkedIn, right? Even.
Can I jump in on that? Daniel, do you mind if I start going organic?
Yes.
So I think what's so interesting about that, Eleanor, what you said is, being transparent about where you are as a company in your own tech enablement journey, so that when people are joining, they're not coming in and being like, wow, you don't have any of this technology that I would have expected you to have. And therefore I don't feel like I'm supported at the level that I, needed. And frankly, my job's harder than it should be because I'm coming from, or I've had experiences where there was more tech enablement. So it's interesting because how can we as a company, again, set those realistic expectations to say, we're on a journey. We actually need you to be willing to be on the journey with us.
Share
that's not
your
always
opinion.
fun.
Yes.
That can be painful. And that's a lot of the growth that we've had as an organization, is trying to find people who want to help us get to the other side of tech enablement, but are willing to, kind of do that dirty work to get there, because it's not always fun to move from, pre-tech to post-tech. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think the key word there, right, and just to chime in, the key word there is transparency, right? Whether it's about pay, and I think it's quite funny when people say, purpose trumps pay, but pay is the gate, right? That's not true. It might have actually even become more important because of transparency. Today, candidates know way better, what the pay rate is for every type of job, and at very accurate level, right? And transparency also around your capabilities. And people want empowerment. You're not empowering people if you tell them that you've got all these great capabilities and they start day one and figure out none of it is true, right? And again, that's completely transparent way before day one. So I think for me, transparency is the key word when you think of the hiring process and how you need to create a great experience around that hiring process.
Yeah, it can't be aspirational. You have to let people know where you are right now, but then also, show that purpose vision of where you want to go and how they can play a part in it.
Yeah, great thoughts. Just continuing now, more on the path of, okay, so what now, right? I mean, we've been focused so far, I think, more on what 2021 looked like, what some of the key themes were, how you have all, in your respective worlds, in your respective roles, navigated this, again, extraordinary year in many different ways. What now, right? If I put myself into the shoes of many of our friends here in the audience, right? Lessons learned from 2021. We've all heard now, and I think we can all relate to topics like, employees having to juggle so many different things at the same time. Technology comes into the picture, puts a strain on people, or the whole situation puts a strain on people because they are so busy already, and here they are having to use a next piece of technology, having to think about what the impact is on their workplaces and careers. So I think, the vast majority of people here in the audience can relate to all of that. Now, where are we going from here, right? What are some tangible, actionable lessons, ideas, little things that you can do during, Mary, to your earlier point, during the onboarding process, right? How can you create that transparency, even during the job posting process, not even onboarding, but way before that, during the job posting process? How can you create that transparency? How can you make sure that people understand what they're getting themselves into? How can you help them understand how Olivia is going to make their lives easier, right? So again, yeah, I guess I want to try to distill it down to, so what, right? How can we make sure that if 2022 ends up being another year that's really challenging like 2021 was, or maybe even 2023 or 2024 is another challenging year, what should we be doing differently going forward? Any thoughts here? I know I have a tendency to ask like the heavy questions here, but I'm actually looking for, simple things here. If I had a, staffing, recruiting, outsourcing business, what should I be on top of here for the next couple of years?
So I'm a little biased, Daniel, right? Because I work every day with amazing startups and ventures. But my keyword there would be experiment, right? Experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And a little like Mary was saying, right? You got to take it day by day. But in order to adapt day by day, you got to experiment, right? And without doing a shameless plug for Olivia or Paradox Eleanor, right? But experiment with Olivia if you haven't used her yet, right? If you see a problem, think about what kind of venture startups can you bring in to solve for the problem statement, right? I think that has to be the word, one of the words that you have to be thinking of, experimenting on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I love that, Ranji. And I think then coupling that with the transparency in your leadership to make that essentially permissible, celebrated, so that people do have that option to experiment. We've been really trying to, one of the phrases that my CIO and I kind of bat back and forth when we need to hear it on both sides is progress over perfection. Because I think we often, especially in a corporate environment, you feel obligated somehow that the end result has to be ideal. But we know so much is changing so quickly that what was ideal even 3 days from now might not actually be what it should have been. So we needed to pivot day 1 or 2. So I think that adjustment of the culture to be more vocal and transparent around being willing to experiment and move at that speed, so that people feel that it's acceptable and that there's not a fear of failure. So I think that's a lot of what change hesitancy is that fear of failure. So how you can remove that from the corporate culture, I think would make a big difference.
I love hearing all of that. Yeah. Eleanor, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And thank you, Ranjit, of course. But I think probably the most controversial thing that I can say today is that there's a work-life balance, right? In the last 2 years, it's an imbalance, right? And I think embracing that and allowing, we as practitioners, right, to believe that, to encourage that, it is an imbalance, and part of that is then how do you bring your team on the journey of transformation or change? How do you continue to support the conversation with your candidates on this journey of transformation or change, or maybe the unknown that may come around in the next corner, in the next turn? But it is about being transparent about the journey. It's about being open to the change and the possibility of change, right? We may have a plan, but as long as we're communicative, as long as we're transparent and open, and also supportive of each other as we go through the experiments that may come across, in this journey, I think that's important. I think we all know that it could be a divisive and controversial conversation when change comes up, when there's one direction or another, even bringing in a technology that might seem threatening or disruptive. And so how do we support each other to try to accept, and then also to understand that I could be wrong, right? We could be wrong, and really embrace the lesson learned from, again, that part of the journey, because it continues, and it'll continue, into 22 and 23. Right?
Yeah.
And maybe again, if you don't mind, on the work-life balance thing, setting boundaries with technology, I think, is something else that we are trying to, it's on, as we introduce new technology, what are the boundaries you need to set with it? Because there can be that reticence to create your professional life to look more like your personal life and have that ready access to everything, because then it's never gone. It's there right next to your Netflix app. My Teams ping is right next to my WhatsApp ping with my friends. And, which one do I want to be paying attention to right now? And so I do think that it's not enough. I'll say a lessons learned for me is it's not enough to say, hey, set boundaries, right? You have to, as an organization, actually create structures to set those boundaries, and also respect them from a leadership perspective, so that you aren't saying one thing but then acting differently and encroaching on boundaries that are set. And so I do think that I love the assistive technology, allowing the technology user to really kind of navigate how it's best going to fit and support the role that they're in or the work that they're doing. But then an additional layer to say, okay, as an employee of this company, here's how the company wants you to respect your own boundaries, your own work-life balance, so that we're enabling you to do that versus recommending you find work-life balance. Because I think what we've experienced over the last 2 years is that's just not really possible. Unless the structures change to allow for it, you're not going to be able to carve out that balance for yourself.
Yeah. Great. Great thoughts. My good friend and last year's speaker on our panel as well, Mary, said on the previous panel here today that there doesn't seem to be a one size fits all. My good friend Adam Hawkins, by the way, I should say, should mention the name, right? Said that there's no one size fits all when it comes to dealing with the new realities of working together in organizations remotely with more technology during times of change and situations that require agility coming at you every single day, right? So what I'm hearing from you here is very much saying, how did you say it earlier, Mary? Taking it one step at a time, one day after the other.
We're all just here one day at a time.
Exactly.
So are companies.
Exactly.
That was work.
Great conversation, great insights, all of you. In closing here, I'm thinking, you've all done a great job, describing these lessons learned and how they impact the future of work, maybe from the perspective of your respective organizations. And Ranjit, the work that you do for startups and venture-backed companies out there. As kind of a closing statement here from every one of you individually, at a personal level, I still mean, obviously, in your professional environments, in your roles, in your companies, but for you individually, coming out of 2021 with these lessons learned in mind, what's the one thing that you are doing differently now compared to before 2021 or going into 2021? What's the one learning and the one thing that you personally are doing differently in your roles, with your team members, with your peers? Is there anything that stands out to you?
I'm going to say something a little bit, right, cheeky, but at the same time, it's real. I think FOMO is real. If you're used to traveling and we were talking about it earlier, right? Being on a panel in front of people, you get the energy, 150, 1,000 people in a room, you feel it, right? You feel it, you're inspired by it. Every giggle, every laugh, every aha, you can feel it, you can hear it, right? It's different. Knowing that in a hybrid office where some might be in person and doing a whiteboard session, breaking down things, it's a little disconnected and feeling that. So I think, understanding that I myself, feel that way where I am, like, I have a fear of missing out in those interactive in-person sessions, but understanding that everyone is considerate. They have a family at home that COVID is real, and the concern of health and safety is real. So how do we bridge the gap and make these interactive sessions? Like, how do you feel that way? How do you ensure that there's connectivity, that, when you're thinking about the meeting before, allowing that transition to happen, that's just like, hey, you're in this conversation. Let's set the stage. Let's set the room. Let's ensure that those that maybe tend to be quiet, like have a moment, have a speaking part, right? And like ensure that inclusivity, include and be mindful of the Zoom fatigue that may be real, right? And so ensuring that the space is as interactive, is as energetic, is as interesting and involved, despite the maybe virtual distance, I think has been key.
I love that, Eleanor. Yeah, going the extra mile, being even more mindful and present, and I guess working harder to making these interactive conversations and forums, and whether it's something like this here or just a daily meeting with the team, feel as real as possible, right? Yeah, that's a great thought. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Ranjit, Mary, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I can chime in with two things that are super simple, but you said you wanted something specific.
Yeah.
I promise this will go past January, but I'm trying to be much more conscious about time and how I ask of others time. And I think that's something that everybody kind of took a little for granted. And one of the biggest lessons learned that gets to the work-life balance and other things. So canceling meetings, reducing meetings, not asking for a meeting, some of those just simple things to make sure that I'm being respectful of others' time and my own, so that I can show up to meetings with better energy and take the time to recognize other people and spend time on the quality versus, just shoving another 15-minute meeting in. So this will be the year I learn it. I go on record here.
That's great. Yeah,
love that.
Noted. Very nice. Ranjit, closing words here for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll break the rules, as you know I always do, Daniel, and I'll pick two things. One is probably a function of the age of my kids, right? I've got an 11-year-old and two 6-year-olds, and I've started to learn from them about technology, and it's a wonderful thing, and it's just something I want to do in a very conscious manner, even more so this year. Loads of stuff. I don't always like what I see, and I don't always understand what I see, but it is a wonderful thing, right? And kind of the world which I'm getting from kids.
Ranjit, will you share your TikTok handle with everyone on this panel here?
Exactly, right. That's the first thing I should be doing. I do want to be able to show you my dance moves, Daniel. And the other thing, which has also got to do with technology, but it goes in a slightly different direction. I love what you were saying, Mary, in terms of setting boundaries. I discovered how I can set the boundaries last year, really in physical terms, right? So where do I keep my devices? Where when I'm in a meeting, if I want to be present, then I have to actually put my phone somewhere else, right? So using really physical separation to ensure boundaries when it comes to the use of technology has been really a great learning for me last year, and something I want to carry on doing.
That's great. Those are two truly tangible and actionable items here. And that's really what I think all of us here wanted to get to, right? It's so easy to talk about lessons learned from 2021 at a very high level and the future of work. It all sounds so high level and all the way up there. But in the end, ultimately, it comes down to these little things, right? Ranjit, I love this. Put the phone away when you're in a meeting, when you actually want to listen to someone. Eleanor, to your point, right? Let's make these virtual interactions fun and feeling real by being in them and in the moment and really focused on what's happening here right in front of us. So great thoughts. I think that takes us to the end of our session here. I know I had a blast. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Of course, the three of you, but then the many people in the audience here as well. Thanks everybody for joining. And I look forward to reconnecting with many of you, all of you, as quickly as possible. And thanks so much for making the time for this, Mary, Eleanor, and Ranjit. Great job here.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.